Have you ever left a conversation certain something just happened, but unable to say what? You weren't shouted at, you weren't insulted, but somehow by the time it ended you were doubting yourself. It might have been a smile, a compliment, a pause that let silence do the work, and you walked away thinking it was your idea all along. That's how they win. They don't argue, they adjust, they don't push, they pull with timing, tone, and just enough mystery to make you lean in. You tell yourself they're just confident, you admire how they handle people, you envy how calm they stay. And somewhere in the background something starts to slip. Not just your certainty, but your center. Because this isn't just charm, it's engineering, it's not just communication, it's design. And it's not a conversation, it's a game. We call it Machiavellianism. The calculated use of charisma, logic, and emotional distance to control perception and shift outcomes. But that term only describes the surface, the mask. Behind the mask is something older, something mythical, a figure who's been outsmarting kings, crossing lines, and cracking masks long before psychology had a name for it. The trickster. In every culture there's one. He lies, but never without meaning. He disrupts, but never without purpose. He bends the rules so we can see the rules. Carl Jung didn't invent him. He found him buried in the collective unconscious. A shapeshifter, a mirror, a sacred saboteur who exposes our illusions by embodying them. And when that archetypal chaos meets cold human strategy, something dangerous is born. Not the brute force of the tyrant, not the neediness of the narcissist, but the calm clarity of the one who doesn't need to win by force, because they've already made you play their game. But this isn't just about them, this isn't a diagnosis of others, this is about the part of you that wanted to believe it, the part that welcomed the lie because it felt safer than the truth, the part of you that smiled back. So ask yourself, when were you most charmed by someone you should have questioned? When did you trade intuition for approval? And what did their mask reveal about yours? The most dangerous deception isn't what they did, it's what you didn't see in yourself. And maybe that was the plan all along. Let's find out. They don't overpower you, they rearrange you, not by shouting, not by threatening, but by mapping your needs and becoming them. Machiavellianism isn't chaos, it's calculus, it's long-term, surgical, cold, not devoid of empathy, but detached from it. They understand what makes you feel. They just don't feel it with you. This is what psychologists call cold empathy, and it's more dangerous than cruelty. Because cruelty reveals itself, but cold charm makes you lower your guard and hand over the knife. The Machiavellian doesn't need power, they let you offer it. They study the social terrain the way a hunter studies wind direction. Every compliment is a test, every silence a strategy. They listen, not to understand, but to calibrate. Their persona, the social mask Jung described, isn't a flaw. It's their weapon. At work, they're the cooperative teammate. At home, the emotionally articulate partner. Online, the enlightened truth-teller. But behind it all is one question. What gets me what I want, and what makes this so seductive, is that they often seem more composed than anyone else, less reactive, less needy, more attractive, because they've replaced vulnerability with control, and control is magnetic until you realize you're the one being moved. Machiavelli wrote, "Everyone sees what you appear to be, few experience what you really are." But the deeper truth is this. They win because you wanted the appearance. You wanted to believe the smile. You needed the structure, the leadership, the emotional containment they offered. Especially when you felt uncertain in yourself. That's the trap. It's not that they lie, it's that they give you the illusion you were waiting for. So ask yourself, when have you told someone what they wanted to hear? When have you performed calm while internally calculating every move? When have you mirrored someone's values just to keep them close? This is where the mirror turns, because it's not about them anymore. It's about the part of you that's playing the same game, just more subtly. The polite deflection, the curated vulnerability, the hidden motive behind a generous offer. And when two personas meet, the most strategic one always leads. This isn't about shame, this is about recognition. Because once you see the design, you can't be manipulated by the mask. But the mask is only part of the story. Because what waits behind it isn't just strategy. It's something older, something playful, something dangerous. A shapeshifter who doesn't manipulate for gain, but to reveal. The trickster is not a person, he's a principle, and he's not done with you yet. He doesn't ask for trust, he asks better questions. He doesn't follow the path, he trips you so you'll stop pretending you know where you're going. In every myth, in every culture he appears. A thief of fire, a teller of riddles, a jester at the king's table who smiles while undoing the world. Carl Jung called him the trickster, not a person but a force of the psyche, wild, uncontrolled, holy in his disruption. And today he still walks among us. Sometimes he's an internet prankster exposing media bias with a fake headline. Sometimes he's the comic who dares to say what no one else will. Sometimes he's that one friend who ruins a perfect moment with the truth. And yes, sometimes he looks like the villain because the trickster doesn't play by the rules, he plays with them. In native stories, he's Coyote, stealing fire from the gods by tricking them with illusion. In African myth, he's Anansi, spinning riddles to outwit spirits and win back stories from the sky. In European folklore, he's Renard the Fox, charming, sly, unpunished. But make no mistake, he's not here to comfort you, he's here to disrupt you. And if you don't understand his role, you'll confuse him for the enemy, because when he shows up in your life, he doesn't bring answers, he brings collapse. The trickster shows up when what used to work doesn't, when your carefully built persona starts to crack, when your shoulds and your musts no longer keep you safe. He appears as the mistake, the outburst, the loss, the chaos. Not to punish you, but to point at the lie you were living. You see, where the Machiavellian deceives to win, the trickster deceives to reveal. That's the difference. The Machiavellian flatters your ego. The trickster insults it. The Machiavellian studies your need to belong. The trickster throws you out of the group to see if you know who you are without it. He doesn't manipulate you into dependence. He dares you into awakening. But here's the tragedy. In a society that fears disruption, we exile the trickster. We turn him into something cold, calculated, strategic. We force him underground, into the shadow, and when his energy can no longer express as play, it hardens into control. That's when the trickster becomes Machiavellian, still clever, still masked, but no longer seeking truth. Only gain. That transformation is subtle but deadly, because now the same deception that could have liberated you enslaves you. So how do you know the difference? Look at what the lie reveals. Does it expose the system or reinforce it? Does it break the illusion or sell you a prettier one? Snowden didn't leak secrets to climb the ladder. He shattered the illusion of safety at personal cost. Comedians like George Carlin or Dave Chappelle didn't just provoke for laughs, they broke cultural silence with precision. Even the Joker, mad, dangerous, mythic, exists not to dominate, but to expose the rot in the system he mocks. The trickster, when misunderstood, looks like a villain, but his chaos is a mirror. And your reaction to him tells you more about yourself than he ever could. If you hate him, fear him, cancel him, ask yourself, what part of you is he touching? What script were you depending on that his laughter just burned to ash? He doesn't want your loyalty, he wants your clarity, because he knows that your masks, your roles, your perfect lines are killing something real inside you. And if you're brave enough to stay in the discomfort, he'll give you something better than safety. He'll give you yourself. But first, he'll offend you. Let him. The traits you despise in others are often the ones you've buried deepest in yourself. You flinch at their arrogance. You bristle at their manipulation, you feel disgust when they lie with a smile. But the question is never, why did they do that? The question is, why does it bother you so much? Carl Jung called it projection. The psyche's way of disowning traits it can't yet admit. You exile part of yourself, then hunt for it in everyone else. You call them fake because you've spent years performing sincerity. You call them selfish because you've repressed every desire that didn't serve someone else. You call them dangerous because they remind you of a version of you that you weren't allowed to become. And here's the uncomfortable truth. You don't get obsessed with people you don't recognize. You get obsessed with the ones who mirror you in a way you're not ready to see. That's the trickster's power. He wears the shadow you've been hiding. He embodies the thing you've refused to integrate. And when he appears in real life, as the manipulator, the disruptor, the morally ambiguous one, you rage. Not just because of what they did, but because of what they activated in you. This is how the trickster evolves into your greatest teacher, by refusing to let you stay blind. You say, I could never do that, but your mind replays the moment anyway. You say, I'd never be like them, but part of you already is. In small ways, in secret, in moments you've learned to justify, the half-truth to keep a friend, the charm to get the job, the silence that manipulates more than words ever could. This isn't shame, this is liberation, because what you integrate can't control you, but what you reject will. And here's the real paradox. The people who trigger you the most aren't villains, they're messengers. They're saying, this too is you, the strategic part, the primal part, the part that's tired of smiling when you're screaming inside. You don't need to act it out. You don't need to become the liar or the disruptor. You only need to own that the potential exists in you. So it stops running your life from the shadows. Because until you do, you'll keep projecting it onto others. You'll keep getting played. You'll keep mistaking your discomfort for righteousness and your judgment for moral clarity. But if you're willing to look at what you hate, you might finally meet the part of you that's been waiting for your permission to exist. The trickster lives in that space, and his grin isn't just mischief, it's mercy. Not because he wants to break you, but because he knows the only way out is through the mask. And if you can face what you fear in others, you just might find what you forgot in yourself. It wasn't the lie that broke you, it was the part of you that wanted it to be true. That's the sting beneath the betrayal. Not that someone deceived you, but that deep down, something in you found comfort in the illusion. That's how the trickster works. He doesn't just manipulate, he reveals the need you didn't know you had, and that's the harder truth. Because deception can only land where desire leaves the door open. You saw the signs, the subtle inconsistency, the smile that didn't quite reach the eyes, but you brushed it aside because believing felt better than knowing. Like the woman who forgave the same apology 3 times because it sounded beautiful. Like the employee who kept defending his boss's silence as wisdom because challenging it felt dangerous. Like the friend who kept lending time, energy and loyalty to someone who never earned it because they couldn't bear to be unwanted. We all do this. We collaborate in our own deception, and the lie works, not because it's clever, but because it fits the shape of our longing. That's why the trickster is more than a deceiver. He's a mirror. And every manipulation, when viewed from the inside out, becomes an invitation, not to blame, but to investigate. What did I want from them? What part of me ignored what was obvious, and what story was I protecting so deeply that I let it override the truth? Carl Jung said people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. And that's what manipulation often protects us from, not just the manipulator's agenda, but our own inner confrontation. But here's the paradox. The moment you stop avoiding that confrontation, the manipulator loses their power, because once you've seen the pattern, you no longer dance to its rhythm. You stop mistaking flattery for affection, you stop confusing strategy for sincerity, and you stop projecting trust onto those who haven't earned it, because you've learned to stop outsourcing your need to be seen. This is what the trickster teaches. Through pain, through chaos, through exposure, that the real work isn't punishing the liar, it's recognizing the lie you were living. And when you do, you don't need revenge, you don't need the last word, you don't even need an apology, because you've already reclaimed something more valuable than control clarity. That's the real win, because now you're no longer waiting for someone else to validate your reality. You're living in it fully, finally, without illusion. Let's finish this. There comes a moment when the mask no longer fits. Not because you've outgrown it, but because you finally realized it was never yours to begin with. The smile you wore to be safe, the tone you used to seem reasonable, the silence you weaponized to avoid being seen. All of it was strategy, survival script, and now you don't want the script. You want the truth. Carl Jung warned us that what we repress becomes our fate, and the trickster lives in that repression. In the gap between your appearance and your essence, in the places you perform goodness because you were never allowed to be whole. But the moment you stop pretending, he stops playing, because the trickster doesn't need your perfection. He needs your honesty. You've spent enough time managing perception, smiling through resentment, avoiding your own shadow by hunting for it in others. But now, you see that the game was never rigged against you. You were just still playing, trying to win approval, trying to maintain control, trying to predict the outcome by becoming what others needed. But the moment you say, "I'm done performing," the whole game dissolves. This is what disarming the trickster looks like. You recognize the liar in yourself, not to condemn it, but to understand its origin. You admit your patterns, your masks, your contradictions. You stop splitting yourself into pieces to be palatable, and you finally make peace with the parts of you that didn't fit the narrative. That's where your power lives, not in perfection, not in purity, but in integration. And here's the truth the trickster never tells you, because he wants you to find it for yourself. You were never meant to be a single identity. You are multiple. You are contradiction. You are strategy, softness, chaos, and clarity, all at once. And when you can hold that, you no longer need to hide. You no longer need to protect the mask, because nothing can be taken from you when nothing is being concealed. This is the final trick and the final freedom. So if this journey has cracked a mask you didn't know you were wearing, or helped you see through someone else's, then don't keep it to yourself. Someone else is still inside the illusion. Someone else is still smiling through silence, waiting to feel seen. Send it to them, and if you're ready to stop performing, subscribe, not to me, to the version of you who's finally telling the truth. The trickster was never meant to be destroyed, only understood, and through understanding, disarmed. Not just in the world around you, but in the quiet, echoing theater of your own soul. And when the mask falls, you'll know this wasn't the end. It was your first honest breath.